look at this.
No,
Who is it? Now, Harry told him he was taking him to Applebee's, I think. He tricked him. Brought him over to the studio. The great
apps.
The great.
I thought I'd been here all along. Oh, wait, that's Feinstein moment. Sorry about that. I wasn't here before.
Please welcome officially to live from Studio 6B, the great John Solomon. Great to have you here.
Guys, I've been dying to do this. You have the best. When I need a pickup at 8 o'clock, I tune you guys in every night. This is awesome. It's great.
Well, it is great to have you here. And I promised the audience the first thing I was going to bring up with you, because you had a little experience with this today. When you hear that Meghan Markle says they had a 2-hour chase around New York City, I'm thinking to myself, I think John knows that that's about as impossible. You can't drive 2 feet without having to stop.
I went 3.5 hours from the George W. to here. There's no chance they had 2 hours at any time of night in New York. Yeah, they're legends in their own mind. Yeah, they really are.
Exactly.
It's terrible.
Oh, God. So, John.
It's like crazy, because at first I didn't really think he existed in person.
I know.
And then he walked in, and I don't know if you noticed during the news, I started stammering because I'm like, oh, my God, he's standing right there. He's standing right there. And I'm trying not to look at him, but he's standing right there. Yeah. And I'm not reading this from his news site. Oh, my God. I should probably pick a different story.
To Joe Biden's great chagrin, I really am a real person. Yeah.
So you did a great hour of the America's First Warehouse with David Zier. So let's talk about the America's First Warehouse first. Pretty incredible, right?
Oh, it's so immersive. The spirit of the people really would drive it, but the house itself, the artifacts, the chemistry of the building, and then the people. It's the most fun I had in a long time. Everyone says, well, the country's on the ropes, it's on life support. It's not. When you meet with the people at America First Warehouse, you realize that there's a silent majority, and they're not going to be silent any longer. It was amazing. Just amazing. I loved it.
Yeah, it was great. I was there. I watched a lot of it, and then I know you did Q&A for the last hour, and thanks for coming over.
Great questions.
I was going to say, how were the questions?
Great questions. I mean, people are really read up. They understand what's going on in their country, and they're not satisfied with the answers they get from Washington. You know, when I go to Washington, I get a kick out of this. I mean, you should do a whole show on this. People in Washington are so full of themselves. They're certain that they've pulled the wool over the American people's eyes. They have no idea what they look like to everyday Americans who are trying to make 2 ends meet, or just have the common sense that drive this country to all its greatness.
Yeah, that's a good lead into what I wanted to ask you, because I said to the guys in the last segment, and I said, we were on air to the audience too. I said, John said a couple things over there in that hour that I really sat back and thought, I want to talk to him about that. You said every time, and I'm paraphrasing, I think. You said every time the country has moved hard left, we've always had a moment where the foundation, constitutional foundation of the country has always pulled us back to the center. And the audience, and Rick was saying, no, there's no one as negative as I am every night doing the show. And I said, well, it's hard for the American people to square up what they see with Comey, Clapper, McCabe. All these guys lied with no disregard for their careers, for what it would do to the country. There's never any punishment for it. They get a job on MSNBC, then they go on as experts, and we got to look at them every night. And I said, John seems much more positive about 24. Nervous that it's everything's on the line.
There is, yeah.
But you definitely seem more upbeat than maybe someone like me right now. Why is that?
Listen, I think there's a few things to look at. First, I really subscribe to the idea that the constitutional republic has a natural gravity to it. So when the pendulum swings too far in either direction, the gravity that our founding fathers put into all the great thinking of our country, it pulls us back. It did after the 60s and 70s. It did after the anti-war protests of 05 and 06. We came together after 9/11. We were quite divided going into 9/11 after the Florida recount issue, and then all of a sudden we came together. The founding fathers knew that we would have moments of strife, and I think they created institutions that long term, if one gets out of hand, like currently we have with the president, Congress pulls him back, the Supreme Court pulls him back, right? How many times has Joe Biden been stomped on by the court, any court, saying you're exceeding the law? They have a way of fixing this. And I think I use this anecdote, maybe in the Q&A afterwards. I was in Philadelphia for the book thing recently, and a mom came up to me and she said, I grew up as a child in the Reagan era. My mom used to say, hey, there's a silent majority of Americans. That's why Ronald Reagan is. And she said, I subscribe to that, but we can't be silent anymore. Silence is complicity in this very moment in our history. And I think to have that palpable sense, and, an everyday person just trying to make ends meet, get their kids to school, realize that on her, she can't be silent when she's got to speak up. I think 2024 is a year where people speak with a very loud voice. And And then you go, okay, well, great, but the Republicans seem to botch every election, and they have botched the last three. But when you look at what Republicans did, they won the popular vote in 2022. They lost the more seats than they wanted to, but they did it without basically doing any early voting. And the Democrats have maxed out early voting. If Republicans just do 50% early voting, they're going to have a tsunami on election day. And I think they just held out too long. I mean, the writing's on the wall. If the other side's doing it and it's legal, why aren't you doing it? Why give them an advantage? Yeah. And I think the Republican Party is now waking up to that. Those two factors, more than anything else, convince me that there's going to be some sanity in the 2024 election. The third one is that there could be an epic Supreme Court case. No one's thinking about this one, but this is the case to watch. North Carolina GOP versus North Carolina State. In that case, it's about reapportionment. Does the legislature have the right to reapportion districts as the Founding Fathers gave, and the courts and the governor don't have a say in it? Right now, they pass a law, the governor gets to sign it, the courts get to overturn it. It's pretty clear from watching the arguments in that case and the oral briefs in that case that the justices are probably going to rule that when the Founding Fathers said the legislature only gets to set the time, manner of an election, they meant only the legislature. That will mean that courts and governors can't overrule them. Well, in Wisconsin, there's a Republican legislature. They can't. They've tried election reform several times. The Democratic governor vetoes it. They could go into 2024 setting the rules of the election, and the governor can't veto it, and the courts can't overturn it. If that moment happens, the Democrats are going to be out of all their bag of tricks that they've been using the last few elections.
And that's huge, because this is what we've talked about, at least what I've talked about all along, is when we talk about 2020 and people talk about fraud, it's always the default position. It was fraud, it was stolen.
Yeah.
I always like to argue that, okay, yes, machines, voting, dead people, all that is always a part of it.
It always has, yeah.
But the fraud happened before Election Day, when these state legislatures had the power taken away, when Mark Elias was going into these states with all of his Democratic thug attorneys, going in and changing the playing field. Votes that were counted on November, just 6 months before that, would not have been counted.
That's exactly right. And later, months later, the Wisconsin Supreme Court said, well, those changes were unlawful. Well, thanks for telling us after the election. Why did they tell them after the election? Republicans were too slow to challenge it before. The mindset that Republicans have to have is you win Election Day before Election Day. You don't win it on Election Day, and you certainly aren't going to win it after the election. You got one time in 2000, it's not happening again. So the failure to challenge Mark Elias and all these things, in some cases, like Georgia actually facilitated Mark Elias. They went along with the changes. They did the consent decree.
Yeah.
Georgia changed it in 2022, and Brian Kemp had a very good, and Republicans had a great election season. All the riding for Republican success here. We were a little slow. I think Republicans are a little slow to get there, but I think now they know the playbook they got to do. And Democrats realize, hey, we're kind of out of bag of tricks here. I mean, if they start doing what we do, we're in trouble. So now they're going to do things like, try to get Clarence Thomas off the Supreme Court to try to do something. Right. But I think Republicans are well positioned. Now they can still rescue victory from the jaws of defeat. They could do it. They might do it. But I think they're well positioned to have a much better run.
Okay, let's talk about the other big thing that's out there. And I know people don't like to talk about it, but I want to bring it up to you. Sure. Today, New York Post, Biden up 7 points over Donald Trump in 2024 popular vote poll shows. You continue to hear the argument that that's the one they want to run against. They want to run against Trump. He can't get suburban women. How's he going to get people off the couch who didn't vote for him in 16 or 20? Suburban women, this, that, and the other thing. They want to run against Trump because Biden will beat him. What do you say to that?
Biden's future is going to be determined by the economy more than anything else. And the economy seems to be stuttering towards a recession and perhaps a really significant stagflation moment. It feels like Jimmy Carter's, we were all younger then, a lot younger then, but I think we remember our parents being in the gas lines and you're going to the food store and odd and even days for filling up. We may not be quite there, but just today, Joe Biden's energy reliance agency said, they're going to be brownouts this year because we took too much coal load off and we didn't replace it with enough solar. Well, we've been warning about that. If people can't get air conditioning when it's 90 degrees out, then they go to the store and their grocery bill is 40% higher and the gas bill is twice as high. They're going to yearn for the days of Donald Trump. It won't matter how many mean tweets he has. The experience they have at the dinner table is what matters most. And I think that Joe Biden can spin all he wants. And you can rig a poll any way you want. There's a lot of polls that show Trump's up 7 or 8 points on Biden. We won't know until the fall of 2024. And so much history can take place. We don't know who's come across the border. Maybe there's a terror attack waiting in the wings. We don't know if the economy is we don't know if China is going to invade Taiwan. Many things will happen. Donald Trump is much stronger than anyone expected him to be at this point. I think Ron DeSantis is learning that. Now, Ron DeSantis could make a power move. He's still got plenty of time. We all thought Jeb Bush was going to be the nominee about this time in 2015, and boy, were we wrong about that, right?
Remember that?
They even see Jeb Bush. I saw him at a restaurant. Like no one even noticed him there. It was like he was like a tree in the forest.
I remember everybody thought he was just going to be coronated, right?
And Donald Trump was just a sideshow, right?
Jeb Bush. I mean, he can even speak Spanish. He was the governor of Florida. He was very successful.
He didn't even make it through the primary season. It's crazy. Politics have a funny way of taking twists and turns. It's a roller coaster ride. Trump's in a good position now, and I think what the prosecutors are doing to Donald Trump is something that Donald Trump could never do for himself. Donald Trump can't be a sympathetic figure. He doesn't want sympathy. Yep. He's a tough, bruising New Yorker that grew up on the tough side of the real estate business, but somehow these prosecutors and all these attacks, they're making him a sympathetic figure, even to people that might not like him. And I think that's being underestimated by the Democrats. They're playing into Donald Trump's play.
You know, the Durham report, I said this on the show, even if you're not 100% behind Donald Trump yet for 24, you're leaning that way, but you want to see whatever. We got to win at any and all costs. We got to win. Yeah. But the Durham report almost gives you the feeling, when you see this so blatantly, it almost gives you the feeling like he's got to be the guy. Because who else is going to go in there? Maybe he went in 16 and thought he could do both, govern and drain the swamp. Didn't realize what he was up against.
Yeah.
Who else can go in there now and burn this thing to the ground like these three-letter places need to be?
And also, there's another thing to think about. He survived the most awesome attacks of the most awesome intelligence and law enforcement agencies in America. He's still standing.
Yeah.
And all those guys that were running those attacks are unemployed, right? Where's Andy McCabe? He's on CNN. I guess that's like being unemployed. And then, you got James Comey. He's out taking pictures of trees and tweeting.
Selling books.
And Donald Trump is in the game, possibly, going to be the nominee in 2024. I think that tells people something about the toughness, that against one of the most unfair alignment of forces, media, bureaucracy, law enforcement, the guy's still standing. And I think people have a soft spot for people who can, our whole manifest destiny. We're tough guys and gals going out west and fighting impossible odds. I think there's a little bit of rooting going on. He's got to do some things. He's got to be able to talk to suburban women. He's got to be able to talk to moms. And there's plenty of things that he can connect on. He's pivoting on abortion in a very interesting way. Just keep an eye on that. I don't think the base is going to be happy, but I think he's making a play for women that are in the middle and want to have a choice, even if they think it's morally wrong. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does something that Bill Clinton did in the 90s when he got himself caught in between his own left wing. He started to say, listen, I'm against abortion. It's going to be legal because the court's not going to overturn it, but I'm going to work on reducing abortions by just giving women choices. I think if Donald Trump went there, he'd be a very appealing person to women. I'm starting to hear him talk that way, and I'd watch for that pivot. But there's a lot of places for him to go. I think he's going to have a climate change plan for young voters, which is, I don't believe the crap, but since you guys want to cover carbon, I'll do it, and I won't break your economy. You'll actually not have to walk to work. You'll still be able to have a car. And I think he'll do a lot of unexpected things in the general election.
Well, I know you got to head back to D.C. We loved having you here. Thank you for stopping by.
I love you guys.
The great John Solomon, Just the News, no noise, and of course, justthenews.com. Check it out. First place you should go every day. The great John Solomon, live from Studio 6B, 13 past the hour. More to do. We're back right after this.